Set date and time. Oh dear. Looks like we might have broken the machine. Ooh, what I will say, merchandise-wise, they're well, let's just kick it straight off into the advertising. We've put together a bit of a bundle for with Christmas coming up. We thought we'll do a big merchandise bundle. So it's basically every merch item we do in one big group. With obviously a discount over the price you would be paying if you were buying everything individually. So get on the shop and get it bought. And let's...
was that the intro, wasn't
That's the intro, yeah. Yeah. Simple as that. And right, let's go and have a look what's going on. If we can actually move in here. It's a bit crowded. Right. This is absolutely insane in here at the minute. But, okay, I'm going to start... Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to start with the reason it's so crowded in here, which is that Utah and the Cortina. Now, the Cortina, actually, a lot of people seem oblivious to the existence of it, and I think that's because we were just finishing it. I think when we started the Uncut series, I think we did a couple of specific episodes called Caffeine and Cortina on it, on the build of it, but it was quite briskly covered. And then as soon as we'd finished the car, the owner was desperate for it back, so it just went straight over to him, and we've never had a chance to even take any finished pictures of it. But as those who were at the NEC last weekend, will know, we had a couple of cars on the late break show stand there. They had a little resto mod gathering of cars. There was an MST Escort, an Eagle Speedster, Chieftain Range Rover, a couple of others, and then we had Utah and the Cortina. So the owners of these cars, being very efficient in their thinking, they both said, oh, well, you've got the car up there, could you just? So the Cortina, we're doing a front anti-roll bar on it. It originally it's got a tension strut set up on the front with basically all Escorts, so we refabricated the inner wings when we built that car. So it's got Mark II Escort struts, cross member, and all the geometry. And it's on tension struts, and the decision was made not to run an anti-roll bar on it because it was primarily for road use. However, he has now done some track use in it with the sticky tyres that are on it, and it does definitely need an anti-roll bar when you're doing that. So we're upgrading that with an anti-roll bar on the front. Utah, there's a little sort of tick list of tweaks he wanted to do on that. There was a little bit of a power steering fluid leak, so we're going to look into that. And then there was just a couple of little rattles, a couple of bits of trim that weren't quite right. We're just resolving a few things there. So we've got a little list of things to tick through on that. But all good. He's loving using that still. It's nice to see he's done quite a few miles in it. That's done a lot of miles, the Cortina has, as well as several track sessions. So all good, apart from it being rather crowded in here. NSU, we're sort of pushing towards getting it watertight. So Adam's been on fitting the windows and their mechanisms, getting the glass bonded back into the sort of channels that we'd replated for it. We've put the frames in. They will need to come out again because all of the aluminium trims on it needs the anodising, stripping, polishing and re-anodising. But that's going to be done all as one session further down the line, and it's actually dead easy to unbolt the frames and just pull them out with the glass still in. So we've just put them temporarily in for the minute. Likewise, the seats, actually we've temporarily put the seats in because it's going to be the best way to transport them without them getting damaged. So we've loosely put the carpet seats and dash in just so they're in a safe place. We're going to stick the front and rear screen in, and then we're just waiting on a few bits, top mounts and lower ball joints at the front, and then we can get all the struts together, get it rolling, and that's basically the state then, that it'll be going back to the owner. I believe he's going to finish the build on it himself, so we're just getting that to a point of it being watertight and rolling. Morris, looking very cool with its bonnet on actually, and I think that's probably the first time we've really shown it with the bonnet on, and that was been my job. I think it was yesterday or the day before, getting that bonnet on and adjusted, and it's gone right. Bit of a pain to get it adjusted right, just because it's with the gas struts on it, it changes the adjustment slightly versus with them off. But with the gas struts on, it's very difficult to gently adjust it because the gas struts try and force it the opposite way to how you're trying to move it. So the easiest way is to take the gas struts off, shut it, and then do the bolts up with it in the right place. But it's quite difficult to get to the hinge bolts from the front with the bonnet shut. But anyway, we're about there with that. I've just got to finish adjusting the bonnet latches and make sure I'm happy with how it opens and shuts, and then we're good to go on that. And then one of the next things we're going to do is get the grille made up for that. But yeah, looking good on that. Camaro's on the ramp because we're going to start doing some of the mechanical work on that. So plumbing really next. So fuel system plumbing, oil system plumbing, coolant system plumbing. We've kind of got the brakes pulled on it after we were finished the paint on it. But the owner's now said he's sort of happy to proceed at a limited pace, but enough of a pace for us to make reasonable progress on it. So that's pretty good. I think I'm going to have to stand here to do the whole of this. Stratos, primarily we've just changed the steering wheel, but there was a couple of things which we'd actually done last week, which I missed when I was talking about it. We've done a secondary latch mechanism, which is actually just some straps that we've put on the clamshell that attach. We made some little machined bosses that attach them to the latch points on the back, and then they basically clip into a carabiner type clip that's on near the actual latches. So essentially you can open it at probably, I don't know, 7 inches, and then you just reach in and undo the clips, and there's one each side. Just because we're a bit paranoid about those latches, if they came open for any reason and the full force of the wind got behind that at speed, it would probably shatter into 1,000 pieces. So we're just putting that in for safety. And then as a twofold thing, we were worried about the strap on this side getting caught in the supercharger pulley, but we'd also thought previously that it would be nice to have a guard over the pulley, because it's very easy when the engine's running to not notice that it's spinning, because there's no other obvious moving components in the engine bay, and it's sort of the bit where you would lean your hand when you're looking at the engine. So we fabricated a nice little shield over that supercharger pulley that just bolts onto the chassis there, so that's nice. George is on with the louver panel for the front. So I think he did a 3D scan of this front clam and that aperture when he did the back one before we designed the rear louver panel. The front one was now going to be basically made to match the back, so it'll have kind of a small number of big louvers into it, similar size to the middle of the 3 ones on the rear, and then we're going to make that in fiberglass, and that'll be painted silver like the back. And we've probably said several times on this, there's a lot of design influence on this from the Stratos Zero concept car, which was at the NEC last weekend, and I got to see it in the flesh for the first time, and I have to say I was just absolutely blown away by it. It's incredible. I mean, I've always been a huge fan of the car, but to see it in the flesh, first overriding thing is it's about half the size you think it's going to be. I mean, an actual Stratos next to it would look absolutely enormous. So yeah, it was really, really cool to see that, and maybe hopefully one day we might get the 2 cars side by side. So that's where we're at on this. So moving on, Mustang, the guys have done the scuttle repaint that we talked about, done all the flatting and wet sanding and polishing on the paint that we wanted to do, and that's back round here, and actually pretty much in a position where I'm just waiting on wheels and tyres, so I can take that out, do the final test driving, but I'm pretty confident that's going to be quite good. Kaiser, which is over there, we've got the components for the dash and all the wood components from around the screen, etc., back from Wicked Coatings, who've done the usual exceptionally good job on the hydro dipping. I have to say I should probably take time to make a special mention for Wicked Coatings. There's very few subcontractors we use where they consistently do not just a good job but blow it out of the park, and they've done just that again. I do a video brief for them to kind of talk about all the different faces that are going to be visible and any things of note, but they filled in a lot of blanks that I didn't even talk about. So for instance, the glove box lid, which sits inset in the main dash fascia panel, they've actually matched the pattern between the glove box lid and the fascia panel, and I didn't even mention the fact that that's where that piece went. So very, very good service, and Jim's now tackling the unenviable job of redoing the wiring to match the new layout, mounting the head unit behind there, getting everything in so all that fascia can go in, and yeah, I just can't wait to see it all come together because it's going to look stunning. E-Type, we sent off the various suspension bits for plating, powder coating. I think a batch has just gone for Xylan. We've got back the zinc plating, so that's ready to go now, and I think we received a big order of new parts, all to do with the suspension, mainly the front suspension on that. So as soon as the Xylan's back, that'll basically be a nice batch of parts ready to get that more or less rolling. So that is good. Also, Land Cruiser, I don't think there was anything significant on the Land Cruiser this week. We're mainly waiting for some of the subbed out processes. So intake manifold design's been finished actually, so that's, I'll perhaps stick a screenshot of that over this. And that's ready to go for machining, and the upholstery is being done at the minute. So it's basically other outside processes that are in progress on that. And Manta, we're still waiting on the gearbox to come back from rebuild on that. But I think that's everything for in here. So on that note, I shall hand over to Nat in the metal workshop and see what's been going on next door. This is not one of our Retropower mugs, but go to the shop and buy our Retropower mugs. This is a black edition, let's call it. Right. Well, hello folks, welcome to the Retropower Fabrication Workshop, and we start with Project Kuma, Mark 1 Escort, and everybody that was working on it who was here 1 minute ago have all run away so they don't get on camera, so that's where they've all gone. This week Tom has been working on it, and I'm pretty sure there will be some footage, I think, of our new man who started yesterday, called Sam. Who has just started working for us in the fabrication shop as well, as we were still a little bit short on manpower. Hopefully now we should be able to just about keep up. So work's been carrying on in the back on this with the arch tubs. There was a bit done a little while ago that we picked up on with the wheel arch tubs themselves actually being made. Tom's done the final bits of metal finishing on those and got them all tidied up, hammered up and tapped up and dollied up all the areas where all the welds were, and got them all smooth and nice. Got all the distortion taken out of them so they sit really neat. Not that they were very distorted to start with, but got them sitting so they all sit perfectly. And then Sam's been helping Tom there do the final prep on the areas where they were going to be welded. Basically the original seams inside the inner quarters here, he's trimmed them back a bit more, cleaned them up, got all the detritus off those so they were clean to weld. Then there's been a little bit of work gone on around the front of these arch tubs here, where the rough cutout, we've gone slightly too far on that, and there was a little bit of corrosion in those corners as well. So he's made a section for that and one to go in the other side as well. And then he's made up the filler strip that goes on top of the chassis rail that sits against that. That's got to be spot welded down here onto the outer flange of the chassis rail yet. But as usual, there's a chain of events as to why that hasn't happened. Basically we can't get in with the subframe there with the spot welder. So what's happening now is Tom's getting on, and Sam's going to carry on helping him in a minute because Tom goes over to mow. So he'll get all that side ready. Then that tub, you can get all that tub welded in. And once that tub's welded in, you can do the same, getting the strip all prepped and tacked up that side. Then tomorrow, when the two of them are here, they'll drop the subframe out. There's a job we've got to do just by the subframe bushes on the chassis rails, put a little chamfer in onto the edge of the rail there for clearance on the bush tubes. So they'll do that with the subframe out, and then we can get in with the long arms on the spot welder and spot weld the outer edge of this section onto the top of the rail each side, get all that finished. And then it'll be moving on to basically cutting out the floor to the new line where the box structure goes over all this lot, starting the work on all that area. Additionally, Sam's been on with removing the original seat and support that went across there, getting the plate welded into the bulkhead or onto the front of the bulkhead, this is the back of that, onto the other side of the bulkhead for where the pedal box goes, and removing all the tabs from the bulkhead area where that originally held all the wiring. Obviously there's a bit of cleaning up to go on the back of this bulkhead here on all the sections that have been welded in. Yeah, he's been removing the tabs and welding up various holes and things just to get all that prepped and ready. And then there's another reinforcer plate got to go on the bulkhead there for where the pedal box goes. So that's all coming together pretty well, and I think that's pretty much everything that's been occurring on this. So moving on from that, we'll shift round to the Churchill Jag. So we'll pick up with where we're at with the Churchill Jaguar this week. Stu has been beavering away in here. Now we've got the doors open so I can actually point at things today, and it'll mean slightly more hopefully. because it's kind of difficult to keep pointing at a bulkhead and saying stewed things to that. So we've opened the car up so we can actually see what's going on. So you can see the dash top that was built before, the main centre section fabricated in aluminium of the dash, separate panels both sides, and the recessed centre section that will hold the navigation screen and the audio controls, and then the lower section of the dash, which Stu's fabricated this week, which is the sort of finisher at the bottom, which goes across and then has a joint. The other half's not in at the moment, I don't think, no, but that has a split joint. The other half is there, and that has a split joint just there, which goes across the bottom of the steering column and bridges that section so that it's all nice and smooth. It looks really tidy when it's finished, and from that you can also then see the structure on the inside of that. It just looks like a piece of smooth metal on this side, obviously. On the inside there are brackets across that for mounting it, and then there's this stepped section with a little lead in into it, which actually enables the panel to slot into place and will enable the trim to be put around it. So that gives us the final finish on the bottom edge of the dash for the trim to go on there. So that's, see that. And then the laser beam shining in here because Stu's been working on the footwell on this side. It's not the most, as of the last few weeks on this car, it's not the most photogenic pieces of car to be working on, because they're just buried away, and when they're done nobody will ever see them. And coupled to that, they're also one of the most awkward bits to work on, so it takes a while. This week he's been working on the side of the footwell for the passenger side on this car, because it's left-hand drive, passenger side of the footwell, and the upper section where it transitions into the bulkhead. It's basically the same section as the pedal box top on the other side where the pedal box fits. On this side that's a blank, but Stu's trying to make it look reasonably symmetrical. But it can't be completely symmetrical because we've got to get an exhaust manifold in this side, which is quite tight in that area. So he's made a section a little bit earlier today. He's used the tank rolls in the bead roller to form a little radius section that flows in and around and gives us a bit of clearance around the exhaust manifold. Fabricated the side that goes by the side of the bell housing where the torque converter sits, and he's then got the laser set up in here to project a line across the car to work out the point at which he will fabricate the next closing section that comes from the bottom of this tube, the dash support tube, to the sides here. And basically the piece that looks a little bit like a fire opening, it looks a bit like an opening of an open fire. It has a sort of a curved section over the tunnel there, over the top of the gearbox there, and then we'll have like a bridge shape over the top of it. But he's put the laser in just to give himself an idea of fore and aft of where the plane is that needs to sit to pick up on all the right points. So he's marking all that out at the minute, which is why the laser's in here, so he can trim these panels that are already in back to the correct point so that they match one side of the transmission to the other, and then from there he can template up that piece, make that piece, do the cutouts and flanges on that, and that will be basically bridging in this area and closing off all this area and doing the transition from effectively what's a square hole to a round hole or a half round hole for the transmission, because we're trying to keep the tunnel pretty tight on the transmission because it's a big one and the car is not very big, so we try and keep all that as compact as possible to keep the space up inside the car. So that's pretty much where we're at this week with progress on the Churchill Jag. Moving on from that, we'll move on to the Project 1 Escort. So I'll move around again. It's getting pretty busy in here at the moment, with busy for Jamie and lots to trip over, because there's quite a lot going on, and a lot of people in here now. So on this, we'll start in this corner here, where Bobby's been working on getting the electric air conditioning compressor in. We were going to put that this side, however, the space and constraints of the plumbing actually made it seem a better idea to put it this side. It, at that point, then seemed slightly strange that it's not engine driven. However, it's quite difficult to make it engine driven in the space that we've got available. So the decision stays that we're going with the electric compressor. So Bobby's made the recess in this inner wing, which is broadly the same as the recess the other side for the dry sump tank, and then he's fabricated a substantial bracket then that picks up on the end of the chassis rail, picks up round where the bumper mounts go, so the bumper mounts still work, and then comes up. That's all fabricated in 4mm steel with these blind bosses welded to it that the actual compressor all bolts into place on from the other side. And then Scott's been working on getting the dryer installed in the front, getting the brackets in place for that, and working out the plumbing, and been creating some plumbing fittings, doing some TIG brazing, and working out, it's really intricate. Getting the pipe work in place for this lot is really quite a tight job. There's some cutouts got to go in the front panel here for a fitting off the dryer to go back through the front panel there to the compressor, and then another fitting to come off from the return from the condenser. That's got to go through the panel there and go back and feed back to the bulkhead on the car, and then we've got to put the bulkhead fittings in. So that's the next phase of that operation, is getting the bulkhead fittings in there. So that's the progress in that area. Ah, yes, sorry, yes, I missed a piece, yes. I was thinking the other bits that Scott had been doing. Down here, Scott's made two large top hat bosses that are drilled and they're bored into the chassis rail, then TIG welded into the chassis rail to give us a flat patch to mount the oil filter takeoff housing on, which I don't think is around here now. In order to do that, he made a little template piece, a piece of fairly heavy steel template with the holes on the correct centres, so that the top hat bosses could be bolted to that template section and then TIG welded in with that holding them in alignment, so that we don't damage the final oil filter housing by welding too close to it and ruining the anodising on it. So that little bit has been carried out, and then the other bit that Scott's been on with is revising the anti-roll bar stroke bumper counter brackets, if you like. These brackets that carry the anti-roll bar originally and probably still will carry the anti-roll bar, they needed revising. This one, by the way, will also carry the bottom of the dry sump tank. There'll be a bracket that comes off this that carries the bottom of the dry sump tank this side as well. It's a dual or triple purpose bracket, if you like. But then the front of those bolted to the front panel, and then he's been working in the bottom of the front panel, getting the captive nut welded in there, because all of those points have been moved by the refabrication of the radiator, and the structure for that's wider now. So the original original captive nuts for those aren't there. They would be in free space in there now. So he's made new ends for these brackets to accommodate those in a new position. Moving on from that, Bobby's working on the inside at the moment. I think last week Bobby had done the rearmost bracket for the HVAC unit. He's also bracketed the wiper motor, but I can't remember whether that was last week, whether we covered that last week as well. He's following doing the aircon compressor. He's now moved on to the tunnel top, and he's moving the handbrake. We've got to move the handbrake back on the transmission tunnel. It's too far forward with the gearbox, with the gear shift where it is, and the seating position in the position that we've put it, which is a lot further back than the standard Mark 1 Escort. Basically, similar in Gordon's car. In a standard Mark 1 Escort, you sit very high and forward. When you drop the seating position, you need to also move the seat back to allow your legs to be in a comfortable position on the pedals. When you do that, then the gear lever with the Mazda gearbox that we use in the Mazda 5-speed gearbox, the gear lever actually ends up in exactly the right position with that new seating position, but that then clashes with the standard handbrake position. So we're moving, again, exactly the same as we did on Gordon's car, moving the handbrake substantially back. So he's working on that, and also getting the anchor points for the seatbelt mountings put in. So again, the original Escort seatbelt mountings went onto the top of the tunnel. We don't want that, we want them on the sides of the tunnel. So he's revising those, putting the new tunnel anchor points in for the seatbelts. We've already got the outer anchor points in. He's putting the tunnel anchor points in for the seatbelts. And then, yeah, that's where he's at. And then the next job after that will be working on the prop shaft centre bearing mount. We use a two-piece prop. Pretty much every car we build, we use a two-piece prop. I'm not mad keen on single-piece prop shafts for a number of reasons. Most of the cars we build are pushing the limits of the length on a single-piece prop. Escorts are a case in point. With a normal Ford-based, i.e. Type 9 structured gearbox in terms of length, an Escort on a 3-inch prop shaft, which is probably the most common size of prop fitted as a single-piece prop to an Escort, is actually operating outside of its design parameters, the design parameters used by GKN, at above 6,000 RPM. I think it's 6,000 or somewhere around there anyway. I can't remember the exact number, but it's not much over 6,000 RPM, maximum RPM for that prop shaft at that as a single piece length. I don't really want to take any risks with prop shafts. When they go wrong, it generally causes absolute carnage. At worst, horrendous injuries, and at best, a completely destroyed middle part of the car. So we go two-piece prop, and then we get very smooth drive characteristics. We also end up with a smaller diameter prop shaft that's easier to work around in the tunnel. So it makes a lot of sense to just stick with a two-piece prop, make sure that safety's paramount. There's no downsides to using it other than maybe a very slight weight penalty, but it's a tiny one. And the safety aspect more than accounts for that, more than covers that. So that's why we do that. So yeah, the next step on there will be while we put in the prop shaft centre bearing mount in from underneath, and then also, I'm not exactly sure who's going to be working on that, possibly Sam, I think, Sam or Scott, put in the seat mounting in for the passenger seat. Obviously we did the driver's seat, but then we had a bit of a reshuffle because Simpsons had a late booking slot to get the exhaust systems done. So we got the seat mounted sort of in a hurry, but we never actually got the passenger seat mounts in because we were busy doing the exhaust tunnel. So we've got to get the passenger seat mounts put in as well. So that's another step forward on there. We've also managed to get hold of some door skins. There's a problem with the doors. These doors have been a bit of a headache from the start, as I mentioned before. The hinges were welded on in the wrong places by the manufacturer. The other problem is where the skins have been clinched round along the bottom, they're wavy, and there is nothing we can do about that without unclinching the skin along the bottom. By the time we've unclinched the skin, it's then going to cause all sorts of basically the bottom of that door skin is probably going to need replacing. It'd be very hard to unclinch it, then refold it to a new straight line without completely messing it up. So we really needed to replace these new door skins. We've managed to get a set of new door skins to replace those, and on the doors for the other car, the frames are actually incredibly good. So we're going to replace just the skins on those and reuse the original frames on that car. So I've managed to get 4 new door skins. So that was really good, and I think. Yes, of course. Really important thing that Jamie's just reminded me of. Right at the tail end of last week, KS Composites finished machining us the hammer form tooling for the front and rear, the front wings and the rear wheel arches. So we now have the epoxy board tooling. Annoyingly, I've actually put the pallets up out of the way because they've not been collected yet and we're really running out of workshop space. So I put them out of the way. But we've got the epoxy hammer forms for doing those wheel arches. So that's going to be a very imminent job now. We'll be getting those done. We'll be getting the wheel arch extensions all shaped up in steel over those formers. So yeah, you'll watch this space on those. But yeah, it's quite cool watching those being machined. KS have a pair of enormous CNC routers. One of them is vast. You could machine. Yeah, I think you could machine an entire long wheelbase transit van just about in that, maybe a short wheelbase one. I think you could pretty much machine an entire sort of transit sized van in that. It's an enormous router. And they machined all four of those tools together on the same bed in there, and there was still acres of space around them as well. But really impressive and a really nice finish as well. It's really impressive work. So yeah, they're all ready to go. So we've just got to make some steel fit them now, which is where the real entertainment begins. And I think, I suppose body shop is the other thing. Yeah, we'll go. Let me just grab my coffee. I'll reach around here. Sorry, I'm making life difficult for Jamie on a treat this week. We'll go round here. And we'll go into the body shop where Gary is back on with filler.
Yeah. Back in time.
Unsurprisingly, more filler. But it is progressing pretty well now. So yeah, the front end of the E-Type's coming along quite well. This is just to remind any new for any new viewers and a reminder for older ones, this is a book that we're making so that we can take a mould from this to make a carbon fibre bonnet. And so we are using the original bonnet with a load of modifications which are now all hidden under here, plus a lot of filler to create a book that we can then take a mould from. And Gaz is on, all of the guys, but Gaz at this exact moment is on we're probably at about the 75–80% there point now really with this. We're on the final stages of filler. There's probably a few more bits to do, and then it's on to polyester. And we're juggling things a little bit in the body shop at the minute because we've got another job coming in at the end of this week, which will be quite exciting. But at the moment, it's just plugging forward with getting the last parts done on this. I think
that pretty much does finally sum up where we are this week. I don't think I've forgotten anything else.
And beautiful strokes from Gary.
Beautiful strokes from Gary. Filler strokes. I think that sums up where we're at. So yeah, we shall see you again next week.